You covered this briefly in your talk. Ben asks, data visualization clearly puts a lot of power in the hands of the designer and statistician. How do we ensure that you communicate the real or at least balanced truth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really good observation. And I'm touching very briefly in my talk at the end, right, when I'm saying we need to acknowledge that there are so many limitations, right, in the way that the data was collected, the way that we're editing it, the way that we are thinking about how to represent it. And as creators, we put ourselves, our own bias, the way that we understand the subject. So is a system of power, like we have a responsibility, and to ensure that we do a good job, I think is like getting more perspective into the process will definitely help, because the more people are in a dialogue in deciding what matters, the richer is going to be the representation than just one perspective. And yeah, it's just like this humanistic approach, really thinking about the ethics and critically about what we're trying to communicate.
It does sound like a lot of, well, like science communication in general, and a lot of work bringing in people from varied backgrounds and
Exactly.
from like
Multiple perspectives, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't realize the pressure behind data visualization, though. It really is powerful.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of pressure. Actually, just as a side story, the night before I launched Poppy Field, I almost pulled the plug. I called my friend, the developer, Nicolas, and I told him, like, I don't think we should publish this, because I knew that the study that the data visualization was based on had a lot of gaps. And it was a study that was quite comprehensive in its own right, but there were things that were still work in progress. As a study, as a collection of different resources, trying to unify these different sources. And actually, death counts when it comes to wars is a very challenging thing, because based on the different eras, based on the different geographies, deaths are counted in very different ways. So I almost pulled the plug, because I felt really the responsibility of, like, this is actually not the full picture. But then I'm glad I didn't, because he initiated a conversation. Lots of people contributed to the study, got in touch with the source. So it really enriched the whole data set, if you want.
Oh, that's a nice story. I like that. Raj asks, how can we use data visualization to challenge fake news? And someone else also asked, conversely, how do you think data visualization has contributed to fake news?
It's a very interesting. In fact, actually, just a couple of years ago, I was part of Data Obscura. There was an initiative by The Economist that was looking at how our truth is being kind of manipulated or distorted through different filters, in which obviously fake news was a big one. Yeah, so interesting question. I think that how can data visualization help navigating fake news? I think it's important to build data literacy, and the starting point in just being aware that as any other act of communication, data visualization is used to reinforce a point of view, to amplify a point of view, as is photography, as is any other craft or disciplines when we're actually communicating something. So by knowing that there is an agenda behind, we need to double check the source. We need to know where the data was taken from and how it's been encoded. And just becoming a bit more data literate and visually literate, we can become a bit more critical when we're actually reading and digesting the news and thinking, is this the full picture? Probably not. Let me check a different source, or let me compare this chart with another one that I might have come across a couple of weeks ago. yeah, we tend to absorb a lot of information in a very passive way these days, and that's the problem of fake news, right? And especially when it comes to data visualization, because there is this assumption that is based on data, evidence is definitely going to be true, but that's not the case.
No, I have to say, sometimes I'm like, is this true? And then the critical thinking brain comes, it's like, no, don't believe it.
Yeah.
Anand asks, what's your view on the problems that colorblind people may have with the use of like certain colors, or also most people being distracted by, I'm going to pronounce it, moire patterns from cross-hatching?
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure if I said that pattern
So
correctly.
I think it's really important to keep in mind that we are communicating to a broad public, and this broad public might not read the visualization in the same way. So if we can keep inclusivity in mind when we're designing, is definitely like the first step to make our outputs more accessible to the broader public. I would say color blindness is definitely subject and an area of focus in data visualization, because one of the most problematic, I would say, aspect of data visualization is when we're encoding data with colors. And one of the most popular color scheme is red and green. That is actually one of the most diffuse color blindness, when you see everything kind of brown. So you're actually not able to spot any patterns, any difference, because everything is just seen by your visual cortex as the same color. There is a lot of emphasis on color blindness, and I think is important, and we need to, create accessible visualization, which might mean just swapping the green with blue, red and blue, perfectly fine, and you still keep the conventional understanding of positive and negative, and so forth. However, there are so many other inclusive I would say features that we could actually build in our visualization, especially when it comes to the digital inclusivity, that I have not seen very much. And I have to say, I'm part of those designers that perhaps haven't put that much effort. It's not until last year that I was involved in a very interesting project with Data for Change in Ethiopia to look at blindness and visual impairment, that I actually understood the stand of the scope and how assistant technology could actually help us to really make our visualization more accessible to a broader public, which means have Control-Alt words, so that you can actually read with your screen reader the visualization, you don't need to see it, or reinforcing the information that you are presenting, not just with the chart, but also with some text. There are many things that we can do to really make sure that we can reach a broader public.
That links quite nicely to, because a couple of people have also been asking, like, if you know of any work that's been done around data like visualization for visually impaired people. Is there anything based on sound or music, or maybe other senses that might be involved?
Yeah, so this project that I just touched on, there was sponsored by Data for Change, is called See the Blind, or Hear the Blind Spot.
Nice.
And, you guys can go online on Data for Change and check it out. There is also like a nice repository of work collected by Paolo Ciccarelli, that used to be a professor at the University of Milan and now is in the States, in Boston. But he's been curating a really nice resource of soundscapes when it comes to data visualization and bringing data to life through sound. So if you check Paolo Ciccarelli, I don't know if I should maybe type it.
I mean, we could maybe Lena, who's in the background, can maybe look it up and put it in the chat, or we can post it somewhere afterwards.
I can post it here for you.
Oh, Paolo. Yes, and then we can transfer it over to YouTube.
Yeah, brilliant.
You're all seeing the behind the scenes at the moment. Thank you. S. McNeil has asked, do you take into account the target audience when planning how to visualize the data? For example, a different way for scientists or engineers compared to an audience of the general public?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the first consideration right at the start of the project. I would say audience and the purpose. So who are we talking to and what are we trying to do are really key important things to establish right up front. I mean, obviously tonight I've shared quite unique way of representing data. Oftentimes I'm just creating simple charts like bar charts. It really depends on the audience and what I'm trying to do.
Someone in the chat did say bar charts still reign supreme, so people still like them.
Of course, and they have a place.
Yes, this is true. And one question said, it looks like you really like using nature as your inspiration. Is there any particular reason you think something as complex as nature is a good tool for simplifying data visualization?
Oh, I love this question. Yeah, so the first thing that I'm thinking is that probably I'm using nature because it's complex. And the world that we live in is usually very complex. And I do believe that data visualization, although sometimes can simplify things, more than reducing it to a simple data point or to a simple bar, it should clarify it. So I really believe that our aim is clarification rather than simplification. And yeah, the reason why I'm drawn to nature is because it's being used so much in communication. So I'm borrowing what we have actually used before in popular culture in semiotics, in terms of associating meanings to those symbols. When it comes to the poppy, it's obviously a symbol of commemoration that is well understood. When it comes to the dandelion, again, it's got some semiotic meanings that we have become familiar with. And even if you're not that familiar with it, it still borrows some visual rhetorics.
One question that I wanted to ask was, do you have, like, out of everything that you've produced, do you have a particularly favorite piece that you're just like really proud of producing?
Well, I think probably the Love and Hate project has been the infographic history of the world. It's been really like the project that cemented my experience in data visualization and infographic storytelling. And has allowed me to learn so much. I mean, I made so many mistakes in the book in terms of like just learning how to do things. But it's been an incredible opportunity as well. And I still look back at it with a smile.
That's good, as long as you're smiling at the end.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really intense. Like we created 100 infographics in about 8 months from start to finish, which meant basically processing a new data set every 2 days.
Oh, yeah, that is a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Elliot's asked, what software was the Poppy visualization built in?
So when it comes to the static, the visualization that I created for the book, it was mostly just Excel. And then I imported the vector file from Excel into Illustrator. This is 2013 when I created the visualization. So bear in mind, there weren't many DataVis tools. And then the visualization that became interactive was coded with D3, a JavaScript library that is based on DataVis components, as well as SVGs.
I guess that's answered someone's question here. Now I'm in the chat and it's scrolling quite quickly. Is there a specific piece of software you prefer to use for your visualization? It
really depends on what I'm trying to do. But I must say I do not I don't code. So whenever I'm like creating something that is quite bespoke, like the Dandelion on the Me Too movement, the Me Too Momentum, I reached out to a developer, like in this case, Lucia, who was incredible in basically taking my sketches and my ideas and my references and my drafts into actual code and be able to process a large amount of data. We had 200,000 tweets, which meant about 1 million data points. Obviously, it was impossible to do it with any of the software that I usually use. When it comes to automating other data sets that don't require so much kind of like custom adjustment or custom displays, I would revert back to RawGraph, which is a really good, and again, I'm going to type it here, so maybe you can share it, RawGraph.io. Tableau is also something that I use, especially when it comes to corporate collaborations and corporate contracts. It's usually like the prefer of the most popular software that people use. So I use that. I've been using also Data Illustrator recently. It's still kind of like in beta, so it's not this stable, but it allows you to do quite some nice things. Data Wrapper is also an interesting solution out there. I don't personally use it, but I know that many people find it really helpful. So maybe it's another one, Data Wrapper.
Alexandru has asked, what has been the key lessons you took away in your journey of doing this kind of work? And have you considered linking it to more sophisticated algorithms like machine learning and the data they offer?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it's like just a humble approach when it comes to data, and obviously the big responsibility that we have because we can influence people with our visualization. So especially when it comes to AI, machine learning, big data, it's really important that we really think about the system of powers, you know, like how all our bias, because even those things that seem like quite scientific and accurate, they were created and built and engineered by humans, right? So we have actually encoded our own bias in those. And it's really important to question in a critical way with ethics how those systems work, because otherwise we're just going to be reinforcing those biases.
I could not agree more. And Rod has asked, who are your key influences in this field? Their first thought is Hans Rosling.
Yeah, Hans Rosling, definitely. Like, I love his work. I love his book, Factfulness. I guess like many influences, they start from probably when I was at university, just looking at people that were doing data visualization in 2006, then now maybe I've moved into something else, like Fernanda Vegas, that now is in AI in Google, but at the time was one of the minds behind Many Eyes. There was one of the first tools for data visualization. Yeah, she definitely influenced me to kind of like, or inspired me back then to take this journey. Otto Neurath from the past, so just books that I read at university, the isotype systems, how those are linked to hieroglyphics, as well as like the visual representation of modern data. Those were books that really influenced me. And nowadays, I would say I'm very inspired by all the news media. So when it comes to effective communication of data, I always look at the New York Times, the Washington Post, the FT. In particular, I actually, in the context of the COVID representation, like I think the team at FT is doing an outstanding work. I follow John Murdoch in Twitter. It's been incredible. I think the man is actually not been sleeping since the pandemic started. But yeah, I would say those are. Also, like Mona Chalabi, I really like her work. Is data journalist, illustrator, artist. She's incredible. Really like her work.
That's a good list to base things on. So I'm going to wrap things up because I've come through all my questions, and that's it from me. I just want to say thank you very much, Valentina. It was an excellent talk, a great science and art collision. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank
you so much for this opportunity,
everyone.
and thanks everybody. Thanks for joining.